My encounter happened as a result of an automobile accident when I was 18 years old. I'm now 52. Kristen was driving, and Tim, another acquaintance, was driving in front of us. We lived in the mountains, so the roads were meandering and ran along a very steep cliff with snow piled over the edges. Chris, who was driving recklessly with our friend in the car in front of us, had to swerve suddenly to avoid colliding with Tim's car. She lost control of her truck after swerving into the snow on the side of the road. We began to drive down the mountain, but the truck abruptly swerved 90 degrees and collided with a large pine tree, wrapping the entire front of the truck around the tree. Time seemed to slow down as we left the road and headed for the edge of the mountain cliff. Scenes from my rather brief life flashed through my mind, and as I looked out over the cliff, thinking we were going over the edge, I thought to myself, your life really does flash before you, and this is how I'm going to die. Then I felt a strange sensation run through me, and the word no flashed through my mind. I'm not sure if this was me saying it in my head, my friend, or something else. My friend later told me she didn't remember saying or hearing anything, so I assume it was in my head. Just then, the truck swerved 90 degrees and we were on our way to a tree. As we slammed into the tree, I remember screaming. The collision was really harsh. I was wearing my seatbelt, and as we collided, everything went dark for a brief moment. When I opened my eyes, my friend was screaming and crying. I was unable to move or breathe. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. Then I felt like I was being pulled upward and out of my body, at the top of the truck, like I was in a vacuum tube or something. I don't recall seeing the truck, but I did see Tim running towards it. His car was sideways on the side of the road, its front bumper lodged in a snowbank. I saw another truck coming down the road from the opposite direction, and the driver, a boy we went to school with who was Chris's ex-boyfriend, jumped out, left his door ajar, and ran over me, crying and yelling. Then everything went dark. I was in a tunnel. I'm not sure if that's the appropriate word, but it was dark all around, and I felt like I was being dragged towards a light far away. I couldn't help but be pulled to it. There was a presence with me as I was in the light. It was 3 distinct beings / men / whatever, but they were all one. It's difficult to put into words. I saw the faces, and they differed in tiny ways while remaining the same. The one in the middle addressed me, but not the voice. As it began to talk, all I recall seeing was a single figure, but I had the impression that there were 3. "Why are you here?" it inquired. I didn't understand what it meant because I didn't understand what here meant. I believe I questioned what it meant by asking, "Why are you here?" but I didn't say it. I had the impression that I was in the presence of someone powerful. I was strongly drawn to Hemet. I wanted to be there to accompany him / them it, despite the fact that I had no idea where I was or what was going on. When I replied that I didn't know why I was here, I felt a slight disapproval from him / them. And then, bang, I was in some sort of something like a body. It was my body, but it wasn't a body at all. I did, however, feel as if I were lying down. I believe I was resting in front of the tree where we collided, only there were no vehicles or a road. It felt like the spotless version of the accident location, with no scarring by man. The surroundings were weird. It was brilliant, like a clear sunny day, except there was no sun. It seemed as if the grass, trees, flowers, and earth all had their own inner light that illuminated everything, everywhere with no shadows or darkness. Everything seemed to be crystal clear. The colors were vibrant. It felt as if I were gazing through a filter. I felt so tranquil, pleased, and perfect. Everything was flawless, and I was amazed by it all. Then I realized I wasn't alone and that he was still above me, staring down on me. I took a step back and gazed at him / them it. "Why are you here?" he had asked again. "I don't know," I said, but did not talk. "Do you know what happened to you, or how you got here?" he had inquired. "I'm not sure," I said. "Can you recall what happened?" "No. Do you know who I am?" He had inquired gently, as though this was the most important thing in the world. Until recently, it appeared to ask firmly, but not in a harsh or threatening manner. But when he had inquired whether I knew who they were, he seemed softer, gentler, perhaps sadder. "I'm not sure," I said again. "I have no idea who you are, what occurred, or where I am." "So you have no idea what happened, and you have no idea who I am?" "No." "At that point, you can't stay. You must return," he had urged emphatically. I was taken aback and felt a little worried. I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay, so I begged, "No, please, I want to stay here. Don't make me go back." But the being shook its head and said, "No, you can't stay here any longer." That was the end of it. I felt like I was being softly pushed back and away, and then I felt like I was in a vacuum, although this time it was sucking me backwards, back to my actual body. I was floating over the wreckage. Oh my God, she's dead," Chris exclaimed. "She isn't breathing. Please assist." but the weird part was that she didn't say it then. She said it shortly after we crashed. Tim flung open my door, fighting with it due to the smashed metal. He called out to me, gently shook me, and then reached over to unbuckle my seatbelt. She isn't breathing, and I watched myself sink into him when the seatbelt came off, he explained. But this had already happened. I saw it happen at the time, but it had already occurred. Chris was sobbing, and her ex-boyfriend, who had arrived on the scene, yanked on the door, but it wouldn't open. He was sobbing and pleading for the door to be opened. Tim was still holding me, calling over his shoulder to other onlookers to walk down the road to the camp and call an ambulance. I was seeing all of this happen even though it had already happened. I realize it doesn't make sense, and that's why I'm unsure about time and whether there was any time at all in an earthly reality sense. I noticed a fire truck and ambulance drive up, followed by a highway patrol car driving down the road. Then the firemen, ambulance, and rescue crew arrived. Tim, who was holding me, let me go as one of the rescue team members spoke to him. He quickly examined me, and Tim gave a brief account of what had occurred. They were conversing with Tim and Chris about how to access the driver's side door of the truck. Then a highway police officer raced over, yelling at all the citizens to leave the situation and move on. He appeared agitated or angry. That's when I realized I was back in my body. I was drawn back in, and I was filled with emotions of cold and tremendous pain, as well as sensations of the hardness of everything around me, even the solidity of the air. When I opened my eyes, both of my pals burst into tears of relief. "Oh, I thought we had truly lost you there for a minute," one of the firefighters replied. The highway patrol officer then pushed his way in pretty rudely, I recall, and inquired what had happened. The fireman stepped aside and gave him space close to me, but he did not leave. "What happened?" he inquired. I recall glancing at him because I remembered being asked that question by that other creature, but it wasn't the same person or voice I'd heard previously. I didn't respond. I simply stared at him. He asked me what happened again, but when I still didn't respond, he asked what my name was. I just stared at him, realizing I couldn't recall anything. It was then that I realized I couldn't recall anything, not my name, not who I was, who the people around me were, what had happened. With the exception of my experience, everything was a complete blank. When the officer asked me again, I told him I couldn't remember. He appeared upset and made a joke about bullshitting with him and how he bet we'd all been drinking and damn youngsters. The fireman then forced his way back in and begged him to back off, explaining that I had just been in a severe vehicle accident and that he initially thought I wasn't coming back. He directed the officer to another interview, so that was pretty much the end of my experience. I gradually regained complete recall within a few days, although those days were really strange. Having no memory of anything other than that experience left me feeling separated from everyone else, as if this world was the odd alien place and not where I had been, where everything was serene, nice, and bright. I'm not sure what I felt distance from, sort of like I didn't belong here on Earth. I felt disconnected from life here. Everything's physicality struck me as weird. To be honest, I thought people were unusual as well, but that could be because I couldn't recall them or my life with them. When I regained my memories, I became consumed with what had transpired, as well as what I had seen and experienced. I was curious about what had happened, what it meant, and why it had happened to me. I was enraged that most people I informed dismissed it as a dream or hallucination, or that a few years later, one college professor said, "It's funny how the brain would make things up to help us cope with a terrible situation." I learned not to talk about it, but I still want to know what occurred, why it happened, and so on. Prior to the incident, I was not religious in any sense. My family was non-religious and religion was never discussed, so I had no knowledge of Jesus or Christian ideas. My driving companion indicated that the three creatures I described as three yet one were the Holy Trinity, and I couldn't stay because I didn't know who Jesus was. I had no idea what that meant at the moment. I learned about it long later and concluded that it could have been. On and off throughout the years, I've wondered about the whole affair. Was it real or was it all in my head, as many had told me? My first husband informed me that if it was true, it was the devil attempting to steal my soul and deceive me, and that I shouldn't think about it. He was raised in a pious household, a Presbyterian. I eventually became a Christian, and I believe it was a foreshadowing of what awaits me on the other side of death. Even though I didn't understand what had happened at the time, I was not afraid of dying per se, but rather of the pain and trauma it might take to get there. After that, it would be fantastic and a state of being that you would not trade for anything. But unfortunately, I was returned. The thought occurs to me frequently, what about other people's experiences that aren't or weren't Christian? Of course, I don't have any definitive answers, but perhaps it's not that we don't all have life after death, but that what we believe influences where we go or how we experience that next stage. So, if you are a Christian, you will spend eternally with Jesus/God in what we call heaven, as we are promised if we accept Jesus as our Savior. If you are not a Christian, I don't think you cease to exist or go to hell, but rather that you don't experience this place Christians call heaven, that you don't spend eternity with Jesus, but that you just experience something a little different, not necessarily bad, but just different because you do not belong with Jesus in this place called heaven, like living on earth. You just don't live in Jesus' house. Not that you don't live, you just live in a different house. My father died of cancer when I was 30 years old. We knew he was going to die shortly as I saw him wither. He wasn't a Christian, and I was by that point. Later, I spent a lot of time considering what Christians say about individuals who do not believe that they will not spend forever in heaven. But does that mean they will go to hell or simply cease to exist? That I don't believe is correct. That has to be false in my opinion. I've had experiences with what I assume are spirits of the dead and possibly something different than actual humans who have died. But those were before and after the near-death experience, assuming that's what it was. I had them more as a child, but I still have them now and then. I believe we continue to exist when our bodies expire in some fashion. It may change from person to person, the actual experience of what comes after, but we, our souls, move on. In addition to the one I've mentioned, I've had far too many more experiences to accept anything else. We were at my parents' house when my father died, and it was early in the morning when we received a call from the hospital stating my father was in the latter stages of death, and that we should come soon since he didn't have much longer. We gathered our strength and made our way to the hospital, which was a 40-minute drive away. My parents still lived in the mountains, and I recall driving down to the valley, not really thinking about anything in particular, just sort of in a haze, watching the countryside go by, when suddenly I felt this sort of whoosh rush through me, like physically pass through me, nearly taking my breath. It astonished me, and I remember looking over at my mom, who was driving, to see if she had noticed anything, but she was just staring at the road with the same confused expression I had only a few seconds before. When I looked at the dash clock, it read 10:43 a.m. I looked at the time because I knew what the whoosh was. It was my dad, and it felt like he was telling me he was leaving, but that he was okay, even joyful, and that this was his farewell to me. Even though it was merely a whoosh across my body, I knew it was him and that he had died. When we arrived at the hospital, the nurse informed us that he had died and that the time of death was 10:40 a.m. But I wouldn't say anything sensitivity-wise, altered significantly as a result of my experience. I'd always had unusual experiences with intuition, flashes of scenes that came true, seeing spirits and shadow people on occasion, being extremely sensitive to other people's emotions, and so on. It was never something I gave much thought to because I had no control over it and it only happened on rare occasions. It happened more often when I was younger, but it still happens now and then. I'm not sure if that has anything to do with my experience in terms of why I experienced the NDE or whatever. I've learned to cope with what happened to me and now lead a regular life. I've learned to ignore what I don't like and go with the flow. However, I still think about it frequently and am very curious about other people's experiences and how they differ and are similar to mine.